Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2015 film The Blackcoat's Daughter. This is an A24 film, so A24, the way they do horror, I particularly like it. I know there are a lot of people out there who don't really like it. They do a lot of stylistic things with the film, which a lot of times makes it a lot slower. The other thing is they like to make sure things aren't straightforward. They like to confuse things a little bit and make you do a little bit of extra work. So I understand why some people really don't like that, but I personally really like it. I know some other people who do. Now, this is a spoiler review, so if you have any sort of interest in The Blackcoat's Daughter, don't continue with this. Go watch it first and then come back and watch this review, because I have a lot of good analysis on this. Well, I think it's good. Anyway, I watched this on Netflix when I'm putting this review together, so... The Blackcoat's Daughter was written and directed by Oz Perkins, who did other films such as Removal, Cold Comes the Night, The Girl in the Photographs, which I have heard of and I've been meaning to watch, and also I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. I've also heard of that, heard good things. That is also on Netflix, and I need to check that one out. Like I said, it's an A24 film, so, if you typically don't like them, maybe you won't like this, but I'd say give it a shot. Filmed in Kemptville, Ontario, Canada. Oz Perkins' brother Elvis did the score for this film, and actually he struggled a lot with doing it because he had never done a score before. He was a musician, he'd done plenty of musical stuff before, but he felt like having the parameters that he had felt very confining for making this. But I will say, even though he struggled with it, the score is really good, the music is really good. I do think it gets a little bit heavy-handed at times, maybe tells people a little bit too much about what's going on and how they're supposed to feel. I'm big on being pretty restrained when it comes to the soundtrack of films, but overall I thought it was good. I thought that when they used it, it matched. I just thought sometimes it was a little too loud, a little too forceful, but good overall. The beginning nightmare in this film, I don't have a whole lot of backstory on the film itself. The beginning nightmare in this film, or daydream, or whatever you want to call it, I feel like is potentially an indicator that the character of Kat, because at this point early on, let me say this, at this point early on, we don't know that she's possessed. We don't know this is a possession film, which, by the way, I love the fact that this is a kind of secret possession film, because I would not intentionally watch a possession film for the most part. I mean, I intentionally watched The Exorcist some years ago for the first time because I've heard so many great things about it, and I'm glad I did, but I've seen other possession films and just they don't work for me. I don't like them. And I think an aspect of that is the fact that you know what you're getting. Like, they usually telegraph what they're going to be. And as soon as you hear a possession film, you know that they're going to use a lot of stuff that was in The Exorcist and things that are similar. And you basically know exactly how it's going to go. Some things change here and there, but for the most part, you know what's going to happen. So I feel like there's never any surprise with it, and for me, it's just boring, and that's why I don't really like possession films. But I liked this because it tricked me into watching a possession film that I didn't get was a possession film until towards the end of the film, which I thought was a great way to structure it. And that's the thing, it's all about structure. This is a very interestingly structured film that does a lot of good for it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But in the beginning, we don't know that Kat is possessed. So when we're getting like the flashes of like the car accident in the snow, we're thinking, oh, maybe she lost a parent. I mean, that's what I initially thought. But then when you get towards the end of the film, I was like, this may be an indicator that she killed her parents. That either her parents were already dead and it was because of an accident, and that's how she came to be at this religious school, boarding school, I guess, religious boarding school, and either that's the way, or maybe she killed her parents. Well, maybe not her, but the demon. So the way it's like flashes would lead me to believe most that the demon inside of her made her kill her parents and cause that accident that killed her parents. And when she's just getting those flashes of it as kind of like a daydream / nightmare thing, it's because the demon inside her knows that it killed her parents, but her, the actual Kat in that body, doesn't know it. So she gets flashes from the demon's recollection of what happened. So she just gets bits and pieces, which would make sense going forward for why she's always like, oh, I don't know if my parents are coming. I don't think they're coming. Because that indicates that she doesn't know they're dead, but she's got this feeling that they're just not going to be coming there. And that's because the demon knows he killed them and they definitely won't be coming. So I thought that was a strong indicator of what was actually going on with that. And I like that they have that. With the opening interaction with the priest, you get the idea that Kat is a very solemn person. Now, initially, you just think she's kind of weird, she's kind of distant, but then you realize after you've watched the film that that's because she is possessed, and that's probably why she's here. And it seems that they probably know that she is possessed, and they're kind of working with her. And I think that's why when she has that first interaction with the priest, which initially seems just weird, he's kind of like gets a glimmer of hope when he sees. He's like, "Oh, are you smiling?" And she's like, "Oh no." It's like he sees a glimmer of the real Kat coming through, pushing past the demon that's in her body, and that kind of gives him a little bit of hope. But then it gets, repressed. So I think that's an interesting scene because of how it makes you feel initially, where it's like, this is weird, and then how you view it after you've seen the film. The introduction of Rose indicates that she's actually supposed to be somewhat of an opposite to Kat, and in a way she is, because Kat is possessed by a demon, Rose is not possessed by a demon. But they give you an idea early on that, like, she's the bad girl. And part of how they do that is she has a darker look from Kat, and you would think that Kat would be the one on the lighter side because she seems very prim and proper. She seems to be doing what she's told. So they kind of fool you into thinking that she's the good one in a sense, and maybe if anything goes wrong, it's going to be because of Rose. Especially when they throw in the whole aspect of, her parents meeting Joan and telling her that she had died. And then you're just like, oh, is she a ghost? Like, what's going on here? And that's the thing. It causes a lot of confusion. And once again, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I like how they kind of portray her like that. Like, the opposite image of Kat is supposed to be Rose, but you end up finding out by the end that it's the opposite of what you think. They kind of are the opposites, but it's reversed. And Rose is the good one and not the bad one, even though she's bad socially because she's smoking, she's having premarital sex, and Kat is not, so you would think socially she's the good one, but she's evil because she's being possessed by a demon. So I think that's an interesting play on things. They set up a creep factor when Kat goes into Rose's room and is touching her stuff with a very emotionless look. The music was an unbelievably heavy indicator here. I think this is one of those moments where I would have liked them to kind of pull it back a little bit. But I think that helps with the creep factor, just, kind of bring it down a little bit. Kiernan Shipka's performance as Kat is quite good. I feel like she just ends up with these types of roles. Yes, she is Sabrina in the Sabrina series on Netflix, which I do watch and I think is pretty good. It's like, light, but, so much happens in the dark, but they manage to get enough light in so you can actually see what's happening. I think it's good because it keeps a very solemn, dark, creepy atmosphere for the film. That, like, everything is in the dark. There's barely anything that looks light at all. And actually, when you think about it, the moments that look kind of light seem to be the moments where the actual Kat is coming through somewhat in her own body and kind of pushing past a demon and taking control of her own physical body. So I like that they chose to shoot it pretty much dark, but they do an excellent job of making sure you can still see what's happening. There's so many films out there that they shoot in the dark and everything's dark and you can't see what's happening. Like, prime example, the second Alien vs. Predator film, AVP Requiem, that's unwatchable because you cannot see what's going on. Everything is in the dark and it's fast. They didn't light things enough so you can really see what's happening. So that's the way you don't do it. The Blackcoat's Daughter is the way you do it and do it effectively. They move between Kat, Rose, and Joan, and with how much they move between them, you're really like, what is going on here? Like, what is the connection? And that's one of the great things about this film is it drives a lot of interest by not giving you too much. It really plays like a thriller because it doesn't give you too much at once. It doesn't, like I was saying about typical possession films, it doesn't tell you up front, this is a possession film. You're waiting to find out what's really happening. Now, I know that can be a turnoff for some people because they want to know what they're getting into. They want to know what they're really watching here. I like it when I don't know where I'm going. Like, I'm kind of fumbling through the dark. but I'm just getting bits and pieces, and I'm trying to piece things together, and then that aha moment towards the end or at the very end where I'm like, oh, this is what it was all the time. And then that makes me look back and kind of look at all these other things and be like, well, this was probably indicating this. That has better context now. Now I understand what this was supposed to be because I watched the whole film. So I just like that kind of thing. When Joan and Bill are talking in the hotel room after, Bill and his wife pick her up, they really build the tension to make it feel like those two are going to have sex. And then they break it in a really good way. And this is kind of something that happens throughout the film where like you feel things are potentially working towards a certain thing and then they break from it. And they kind of like make you like, oh, okay. So it sets up the expectation that you can't expect certain things. Like you don't necessarily know what's going to go on. And that's great for the audience experience because anything could happen. It really keeps you engaged and that makes it, like I was saying, more of a thriller film. When Rose asks if there's anything else she can get Kat says, quote, "No, you had your chance." Now, this kind of indicates to me, even before I knew what was really going on in the film, that indicated to me the way she said it, that she was going to harm Rose. That Kat was going to harm Rose. It was the delivery of how she said it and the specific words that were chosen. Because as we all know, words are chosen very intentionally with scripts. Actions are as well. What's actually in the film are intentional. So if there's something in the film, most of the time it's intentional to indicate something or set something up. And this is clearly one of those moments because obviously, Kat kills Rose. This is your first big indicator that something was coming. What is going on? I was so confused at this point. When Bill and Joan are talking and Bill says his daughter died 9 years ago, you assume it's going to be Kat. I assumed it was going to be Kat. But then he shows the picture and it's Rose. And I'm like, what is going on here? Because Kat seems like the one that's really disconnected and out of it. So you're like, oh, she would be a ghost probably. And that's probably what's going on. That did make me think, though, that it could be a ruse for Bill to ease Joan's mind when he actually has something nefarious planned. Now, this kind of illustrates how my mind is just going in all these different places when I'm watching the film because it didn't tell me already what it is, which, like I said, is a great thing for me when I experience films. I love that. So this was good the way it was set up. When Kat throws up at the dinner table, it did at that point start to feel to me like, you know what, I think this might be a possession film because she seems even more out of it. The throwing up aspect made me think back to The Exorcist because that was a clear indicator of what was going on, of the possession, and that's, a link amongst a lot of possession films. So that made me start really paying attention to Kat, and then I started thinking, is this secretly a possession film? And I ended up being right at that point, but it took quite a while before we got to that point where I could guess that. And then the way it, played out wasn't a straightforward possession. They actually didn't focus a ton on like exorcising the demon or anything, which I was happy about. That was a pretty quick thing. I think the moments of Kat listening to the phone and she can't, like, you don't know what she's doing listening to the phone and she seems really out of it and giving kind of like vague answers. And then that moment where you actually experience from her perspective, just hearing like muffled things going on. And then later on you hear muffled from her, which is, when she's found with those severed heads in the boiler room and the police officer's there and going to shoot her, you kind of get the idea that those things are kind of linked somehow because the way him yelling at her sounds is very similar to the way it sounds when she was on the phone. Now that would indicate to me that that's a moment of her, the actual Kat in that body, hearing something and experiencing it behind the filter of the demon, basically. So when she's on the phone, I think that's her trapped in her body and just hearing things kind of filtering through the demon to the actual her inside of her body. And then I think the moment where we see her hearing things that way with the police officer about to shoot her, I think that is an indicator that that's what was going on when she was on the phone. It links those two things. So just a theory there. And then the other thing that, well, I'll talk about it in a little bit. I don't want to spoil that aspect of my idea. This is the type of possession film I can get into. It did its own thing and lets you keep guessing instead of having all the information up front. Kind of already talked about that. There's an indicator of when the demon takes over when Kat is bathing. So when she's in the bathroom and then you see like the bathroom tile, there's like a close up of bathroom tile with like some condensation on it, and then there's some light, and then you see like a little shadow kind of appear on it. That's the moment kind of indicating that it's a full takeover of her body pretty much. Now, when you're watching it, you don't necessarily know that that's what it means, but you know something's awry, something's going on, something's weird here. And then looking back, you can be like, oh, that's the kind of indicator moment that it has taken over. It appears Joan is possessed by the same demon. Since she does the same thing that Kat did, you know, she kills people, she cuts their heads off, she takes it to the exact same boiler room, she sets them up. Also, her hair, I think, is meant to be an indicator, a connection to Kat. Their hair looks the same. They both look dyed, which I think they are. And I think that's supposed to be a little indicator that the same demon that was possessing Kat possesses Joan. Now, we know at this point, when we're seeing Joan, that this is 9 years after the actual events of Rose and Kat. So it is the same demon. It's kind of just showing you the two timelines of this is what happened when this demon possessed Kat and then killed Rose and those other two people. Now, 9 years later, the same demon possesses Joan, goes and kills Rose's parents, which is kind of finishing the job of killing that bloodline. And actually, and that raises a question. Was Rose the daughter? Oh, so yeah. So Bill is a clergyman. Yeah, I believe Bill is. Isn't he? Someone put it in the comments. He might be. So that could be kind of an indicator of what Blackcoat's daughter is. They're kind of going after that bloodline. But anyway, so Joan is possessed, basically. I'm going back to that. And one of the other indicators, other than, you know, her freaking out too, because that's another thing. I think the moment of her at the very end where she's flipping out and she's crying is the demon has basically left her. Either left her or let her take control of her body again. And she knows at that point what she's done. And that's the actual her finding out what she's done and just realizing, oh my God, this is what my physical body did. I didn't do this. The demon did this, but this is what my physical body did. And she just loses it. Another clear indicator, well, not clear, another little indicator that I think shows that Joan is possessed is earlier on when she first gets picked up by Bill and his wife and she's at the hotel, there's like, she showers and you see these, you see the scars on her. And the scar, it's like a shot, like a shot, like she was shot with a bullet. And there's like a flash memory of someone shooting her. And when I look back, I think that's the same as the moment where that police officer shows up and we're led to believe shoots Kat. So that would indicate that it's the same demon possessing these two bodies, because that memory is the demon's memory, because the demon was in control of Kat when the police officer shot at her. And then, you know, it's still, that memory's still there when the demon is in Joan. And then I guess the scar's there as well. That's the only way I can explain that little portion of the film. And also, like I said, you know, everything's there for a reason. So why would that little portion be there? It's intentional. So, okay, so I looked it up, and Blackcoat, what a Blackcoat is a disparaging term for a clergy member. So what I really think is that the Blackcoat's daughter refers to Kat, and the Blackcoat in this situation is the demon that possesses her. Now, the derogatory term for a clergyman, meaning basically like the inverse in this case of a good clergy person, being a bad clergy person. And that's what the demon is. The demon is basically, it's not Satan, but it is a bad clergy person that is taking over bodies and doing Satan's bidding, basically. So that's my idea of where Blackcoat's daughter comes from. So some things to kind of wrap up about this film. The cinematography is really good in this one. Cinematography is done by, I want to call out her name. I think I have it up on my phone real quick. I think her last name's Kirkwell. Kirkwood. Julie Kirkwood. Outstanding job on the cinematography. Really, really good. A lot of interesting ways of framing the characters, especially early on. There are a lot of shots where there are interesting shapes to the sides of the characters and also behind the characters. So you're not just looking at them, you're also looking at what else is going on in the environment, and it creates a really cool atmosphere. Also, the aspect of what I was saying about the use of light, which is tricky, is really, really good. Cinematography is great. Directing is really good as well. Acting, very good. The way the soundtrack is, it makes every character seem suspicious, at least early on in the film when you don't know what's going on. This is actually a good way to keep the audience guessing and keep the audience a little bit paranoid about who is who and what they're actually getting at. Because honestly, watching this film before I knew what was really going on, I was suspicious of everyone. Like, the way the film plays out, everything feels weird. Everyone feels suspicious. Everyone feels odd. Another thing kind of playing into that is that the dialogue is sparse. And when it happens, it actually doesn't indicate a whole lot of what's going on, which gives you this whole feeling of being a blank canvas, not really knowing what's going on, and just being very cryptic. Kind of like saying, it's like the film is saying to you, let me lead you, but I'm not going to tell you what's going on. Let me take you through this haunted house, basically, with your eyes closed, and you just feel things out, and I'll let you know what's going on as they happen. So interesting way to do it. This film is slow, so I could see where people actually wouldn't like it from that aspect, but I think it really helps to build the atmosphere. It builds the dread, it builds the tension, the uncertainty, and the other thing is it gives you time to kind of start thinking about what's really going on and kind of creating your own theories in your head. So I like that about it. Why do they have it broken into the chapters of the girls is my question. Because Kat is introduced first. So I mean, I do kind of understand. First of all, let me go back. I don't understand why they broke it kind of into chapters. They didn't need to do that. Where they have it come up and it says Rose, then it says Joan, then it says Kat. I don't know why they did that. I don't think it was needed, but it confused me at first because I was like, well, why is Kat the third one? Because Kat was the first character introduced. And then I get it because Kat would be the last one because that's the origin of the real story itself. So then I don't understand why Rose was first, though, because, I don't know. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me why they did it that way. So what happened with Rose and Kat was in... Oh, so it's not a question. So what happened with Rose and Kat was actually in the past, and what happened with Joan and Bill and the wife was in the present. So this is one of the great things about how this was set up. And I'll read a little thing about it. How we realize at the end that the events we thought were current with Kat and Rose, because that was introduced first, is actually not current. That was 9 years in the past. And what we're seeing as current is Joan. That's what's going on. And it feels weird just because usually with a film we get chronological order. That's what we assume we're getting into. So whenever a curveball's thrown out like this, it really messes with your head. It creates confusion, and in this case, it does it in a good way. So this speaks to how important sequencing is, because it's a very straightforward story. It is. But how they confuse the timeline is what actually makes it a thriller and creates so much interest for the audience. Had they just done this in its regular chronological order, it still would be a good film, but I don't think it would be as interesting. I don't think it would be as engaging. I don't think it would play as much like a thriller as it does otherwise. This speaks to the whole A24 horror thing, where we're going to make you work a little bit harder. We're going to confuse you. We're going to immerse you in the story and lead you through something. But when it's done, you're going to have to figure out some stuff. And once again, that's something I love, but I understand not everyone does. So anyway, I did quite like this film. I didn't think it was a perfect film. Like I said, the music was a little heavy-handed at times. Like I said, it's a simple story. Yeah, I mean, it's a good film. It's a very good film. So With a possible 5 stars, half stars in play, I'm going to give this a very solid 4.5-star rating. I think this is very good. I'm going to be watching more A24 films, horror films that is. I already have reviews for Green Room, Midsummer, and The Killing of a Sacred Deer. So I'm going to create a playlist on my channel for all A24 horror films, and I'm going to go through as much as I can. Netflix actually has a bunch right now, so check those out if you're interested. Real quick, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button. That's your best way to repay me for anything that I do if you like anything I'm doing. If you are going to subscribe, though, hit the notification bell. That way you know every time I put out a video and when I do live streams, because I'm doing live streams every other Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel. Put some comments down here. I'd love to talk about this film if people have thoughts on it. It was very interesting to me, obviously. And if you've already subscribed, hit that thumbs up so that I know you're still watching and you can, encourage me to keep going. But regardless, thanks for checking this out. And until next time, keep it brutal.